Hey there, everyone. We're back at it, adventuring with the family, this time to a Seaside, Thousand Trails. It was a fun vacation, a fun getaway during spring break. But we started out on the beach here in Oregon, of course, and in the month of March, it rains. So we're hanging out in the trailer a little bit. I was working on this trip, so it was nice to be able to get out and do some adventuring. It's part of our membership of campgrounds that we have, but I was also just able to work at the same time. And so, Marissa's in charge of the kids from when they get up until about 1:30 or 2 o'clock, but I'm able to pop over and help out with things. So it's worked out really great. I get started a couple hours before everybody gets up, and I can knock that work out. But we did a little more indoors this trip than we normally do, at least the first half of the week when it was raining real bad. But the good news is there was a swimming pool here, and so Marissa got to get the kids out. This was their kind of first time back in the pool this summer, but it was cool to see, even in just the few days that we were there, how much improvement they have. And it's just a reminder that even if you are not sure about a situation, or even if your kids aren't sure about a situation, that the only way to improve your skill is to practice and to increase that exposure. Now, obviously, some instruction helps. I have a background as a swim instructor and as a competitive swimmer, and so that helps. But just the exposure and the comfort with getting their faces wet and getting underwater. Like here you see Madeline, she's trying to work on her front glide. This is the first day that she was swimming there. And by the end of the trip, she was touching the bottom of the pool with her hands and really way more comfortable getting her face wet, holding her breath longer, being in different positions under the water. So it's an encouragement from us to you guys to find a way to expose your kids to a new situation to build their confidence. And when they're not good at it right away, or they seem hesitant with it right away, that really the way to build that confidence is repeated exposure. Like here, Jonah's fearless. Now, Madeline still doesn't love jumping in the deep end of the pool, but Jonah's fearless. Back at it, this trip we did a lot of these kind of charcuterie board type of lunches, but then we also got to bring our sausages with us. Now, if you follow along, you know that we made these sausages with my dad just a few months ago, and here we are putting them to good use. So everybody loves the sausage dogs. These are the kielbasa ones that we did end up smoking part of the time and then baking, but they turned out real good. And it was kind of fun. We don't normally eat inside the trailer, but got to all have lunch together there while I was working. Now, even though it was raining this first day, we knew we had to get out after I got off work and do some adventuring. And so here we are. We ran into this huge herd of elk just up right close to Fort Clatsop. So if you don't know, Seaside, it's kind of northern Oregon coast, and just 20 minutes north of there is Fort Clatsop and Fort Stevens, and then Astoria is just a little further than that. But these historic areas are just so cool, and there's a ton of elk around there. So it was fun to see, but Fort Clatsop was our target for the day. And here you see it's definitely Oregon weather. It's raining a lot, but it's a good reminder that when the Lewis and Clark expedition was here wintering over, it rained almost every day that they were here. And it's fun to be back in the museums again here in Oregon and just checking out everything. Now, I will be the first to say, when you got 5 little kids, they're so distracted by every visual, everything that they can see. It's so easy to kind of bounce all over the place and be crazy. So we talk about this a lot of times, but we got a game plan ahead before we walk in the door, what the game plan is going to be. And then Marissa or I will take take point on explaining an exhibit, one exhibit at a time, staying together. And then whoever's not doing the talking helps to focus the kids. Hey, listen to what Dad's saying. Everybody pay attention. We'll go to that next one next. But that way I think we really take the best opportunity we can to learn what there is to learn kind of at each window or at each exhibit. And it gives, you adapt, you adjust. Sometimes you can cover a lot of ground. Sometimes the topic is above the heads of most of them because they're so little. But this stuff is fun. Dress up as Lewis and Clark. Look cool. Look at the statues. This man was so nice. He was just loved explaining the dog to the kids and loved explaining some of the rifles and the different tools that they use and how hard they worked to pack everything. And then here we were learning about how they made salt at the salt works that actually are in Seaside. So they went way south from where Fort Clatsop actually was in order to make salt where the ocean wasn't diluted by the Columbia River. Pretty interesting. And cool to see the blend of the native culture, the native things, and then the things that the Lewis and Clark expedition achieved and did. We got to we're going to start doing a national park passport. So we put a stamp in that, and then we're off down the trail in the rain to see the reconstruction of the fort itself. Pretty cool. They built this fort, I don't remember the number of days now, but incredibly fast. They picked a location and they had to get it done before the weather went really south on them. So it's really awesome to be able to walk through and see how tight their living actually was through the winter. I mean, they call it a fort, but not glamorous at all. Essentially bunk beds and fireplaces to sleep, and that was about it. But it's really cool to see the recreating of the craftsmanship of how they would have built it out of logs and framed a few windows in. And I didn't really realize this, but they really did run the expedition like a military mission. They drilled and they were very orderly in what they were doing. So that was kind of interesting to learn this time around. Now, we can't get out as a family and have an opportunity to see nature without taking it. So even though it was raining, it's pretty wet. We're all bundled up in our hoods. We went on this boardwalk path, and it just struck me how even in what seems like a dreary day, that there's some beauty in the creation to be found in it. Some beauty in just all the types of weather that God has made and that God ordains by his word. And just the fog and the rain and the trees and the different mists and the gray tones that were so pronounced this day. I don't know. It just struck me as uniquely beautiful, as a different way, a different way to enjoy the creation that we have. And, you might say, oh, it's such a dreary day, or it's not a nice day, but I think a lot of that has to do with the mindset that you go into it with. So it was a nice time to hike, even though it was rainy. And we saw the elk on the way back out. Now, this trip we ate dinner a little later than we normally do, maybe, but it was good to do the adventures and then come back and have something ready to throw on the fire and cook up. All right, so we're out here camping, and I just want to explain a little bit of this cooking setup we got going here. So we got our cast iron, right? These antique burners, pretty cool. So they compact really nicely, but they're a lot more powerful than like a regular Coleman folding stove or something like that. And this little here, you might wonder what this is for today. The wind is blowing like crazy, and so this helps keep the fire under here from going out. So that's a little ingenious working. But today we've got Korean barbecue chicken. The rice is going inside. It's one of our favorites right now, is this kind of Korean barbecue flavor. And you can really do it however. You can do it over the briquettes. You can just do it in whatever skillet you have. I suppose you could throw it in the oven just the same. Whatever way you prefer to kind of cook up your chicken. And then I just like to toss it in the sauce afterwards. You can put a little sauce on it while it's cooking too, but toss it around, get some good flavor, get some good color on the chicken. And then our favorite thing to do is to throw it together with just a rice, like a brown rice or white rice, and a slaw. So our go-to is really simple, just cabbage, carrots, onions, and then mayo and an acid and salt. So good. Now the next day, I kind of split up my work day so that we could go at low tide and we could go to a place called Hug Point. Now Hug Point is like south of Cannon Beach, maybe like 10 minutes or less. So it's not very far south down the beach. We got to the Hug Point actual turnout, and it was just packed. And there was like 8 cars waiting for a parking spot. So we thought our plans for the day had kind of been shot, that it wasn't going to work out to go and see this historic place and the caves and the waterfalls there that we'll see all in a minute. But we thought it was kind of shot. And then we realized there's this other turnout we had passed a few miles north called Arcadia Beach. And so we turned in there and we're like, let's just see how far it is. And so we started walking down the beach and we ran into this. Now we didn't realize it coming from this angle, but once you walked past it and the wind was blowing it towards you, we realized it stunk real bad. It was some sort of pieces of a whale, we think, washed up on the shore, and obviously very rotten and broken into pieces. But it was cool to kind of guess at like, oh, what's this piece? What's that bone? What do you think this is? And this one here, I think it must be like a piece of the jawbone. And I told the kids like, oh, go stand it up. I didn't realize it was like soft. I guess probably because it's rotting, or maybe it's cartilage of some sort. But it was pretty cool to see these different pieces. Or gross. You might think it's gross, but kind of to see the insides of nature. But one of the things I was going to say was we started walking down the beach and we realized, well, when we had pulled into park, I have this thing called Onyx Maps. And it kind of gives you a real-time GPS view of a satellite map. And we were able to see it wasn't too far to this, which is a place where, believe it or not, the old original stagecoach path for the highway, I guess, on the coast, not the highway, is probably not the right term, but the road went here. This is flattened out on the rock around this point. That's why they call it Hug Point. And I guess in a high tide, this is underwater, because we're walking all on barnacles and different things here. But at low tide, like it is now, you can come right around the edge of it. And I don't know if it gets covered on every high tide or just when it's a real high tide, but it was pretty cool to come through here and kind of see, like, man, I can imagine on a stagecoach or a wagon going around that point instead of going up and over. But on the other side of it, on the south side of it, there's this beautiful waterfall. And so it was really cool to see all the water coming down, get some pictures. You don't normally see a waterfall this big on the beach, so that was super neat. And then there's all these caves there. And I don't know, some people, caves freak them out, but I love caves. And I love just kind of getting to see the power and the uniqueness of God's creation, how a combination of erosion from water flowing down and erosion from the ocean, and maybe even the wind, creates these just incredible carvings out of the rock. And you get to see what the waves have brought up and deposited in there. And you get to kind of picture, if you could hide out in here, and I don't know, I think it gives the kids like a sense of adventure, and I love to encourage that in them, because I think it's so important that they're willing to like try something new and use their imagination and see something different. And so it's just a fun time, I think, especially for me. Maybe it's more fun for me even than them, but to encourage them to just explore something crazy. This one was pretty massive, and it's got this strange giant rock in the middle of it, and then this shelf that you can kind of go all the way around behind. And there's this like crazy log wedged up in the back there, and there's a stump stuck up in the rock in that crack up there. It was just crazy. It was crazy to think, wow, the water and like a storm tide comes all the way up here so forcefully that it like launched this giant log into the back of here. And here we are like exploring it in the dark. So it was fun. We had to get our flashlights out for this one because it was so dark back here in some spots. Madeline, she loves the light. She's like, I want the light, Daddy. So she can see. Makes me laugh. But you don't realize, kind of, there's that log. How did that even get in there? It's just smashed up in there by the waves. And then it's on low tide, obviously, so we can get back in there and explore. But then back at it, back around the point to do our walk back on the beach. And this is a case, like I said before, we just seek to take every opportunity we can to get out and see something that's maybe off the beaten path, or maybe just something that we haven't seen before that is something that is a unique experience. And Marissa, bless her, she has been doing just a really awesome job this year of looking really carefully ahead at what there is to do, and really getting like a bucket list and a plan together so that we know, even if it's not planned out day by day, that we know these are the things we want to do. So maybe that's a tip to take away. If you can just look in your local area and find a list of things that are within driving distance that you know you want to do, then you have a list of things to do. And once you have a moment of time, whether it's an afternoon on a weekday or a morning or a Saturday, you know what you're trying to get out and do. All right, guys, headed back. And we always talk about, hey, what went well, what didn't go well. Here's a tip. If you're going to Hug Point and you want to see the caves and the waterfalls, park just north, a mile north of the main turnout for Hug Point, is a little place called Arcadia Beach. There's a turnout there off of the highway, and it's about the same distance of a walk. It was a mile. You see the point back there behind me, and then we're at that next point there where those rocks are on the beach. So totally walkable, even with the family. I would highly recommend. Now, you can't be on the beach with all those rocks without playing a little King of the Rock or just climbing on something. So we find some that are safe, and we let our kids climb around and play and slip and fall and see what they can get up on top of. in a way that's safe. I heard a quote recently says that experience is gained by letting your kids do dangerous things carefully. And that's what we try to do. We try to create some parameters, set some boundaries, and do dangerous things, but do them carefully. We saw this eagle. It was a premature eagle, and we saw him on the way down the beach and the way back in the same stag. But here, another piece of this gnarly sea animal. We think maybe a whale, but that's a big vertebrae, from some portion of it. And super stinky. It stunk so bad, but it was pretty cool to see. Now here we are, just back in the trailer. We had kind of a cool spot. It was next to kind of the edge of the camp, so there was a road, and the kids would just run back and forth and ride their bikes back and forth. This is, again, just another morning where I'm working, and so Marissa is taking advantage of the breaks between the rain showers and getting the kids out to play on the playground, getting the kids out to ride their bikes, getting their wiggles out, and then in between, or when it's raining, we're playing games in the camper. Now, this little girl has impressed me so much with her bike riding this year. Like last fall, late in the fall, she decided that she was going to ride her pedal bike, like before she turned 3. And she started to get it figured out. And now look at her. She's just going and going and going. And even from the time like that we were on this trip to today, now she doesn't ever need somebody to help her start. She always starts herself. But here she's still getting the hang of it, especially in the gravel. This was a new bike riding experience for her, kind of being in the gravel, but it's fun. I think another thing that Marissa and I have been kind of talking about a lot and really striving to do is just to take every opportunity to go ahead and be active with the kids. So even if it's as simple as like, oh, we're just going to ride our bikes around the camp, 5 or 6 or 7 times, and we do it. We just get on the bikes and ride with them. They love it. It's a little bit of like low strain exercise for us, and it's good. It's good just to remember to be active. Now these boys and Madeline, they wanted to start a fire. They want to start a fire so bad. So I'm trying to cook dinner, and they're trying to start a fire, and they're trying to blow on it and put little pieces of wood on it, and it's fun. It's fun to just let them try to learn. Let them burn their fingers if they need to or whatever. But we're going to have some breakfast for dinner here. So this is one of our fun things we do when we're camping. We'll take like sausage or bacon or whatever we got going. And Madeline, loves to help cook. So she's helping cook the sausages up here. And then we are getting ready to do one of our favorite breakfast for dinner meals. So we'll show you what the surprise is here in a minute. But Marissa is getting the whipped cream, the whipped cream cheese, or just regular cream cheese, whatever you've got. It doesn't have to be whipped, but she's putting it on the bread. And then Madeline here is going to be putting it, she cracked all the eggs, and then we're going to put some strawberries. This is just frozen strawberries that we picked last year. Just plain, no sugar, nothing. Just frozen strawberries. We let them thaw, put them in the cream cheese, and make up these sandwiches, dip them in our milk and egg mixture, and make stuffed French toast. So delicious. Now you got to cook it on low, give it a chance to get cooked kind of all the way through. But man, oh man, is it worth it. And the fun thing is, we've discovered you can do it really with just any kind of bread. So here we have like a really nutty, grainy, whole grain bread. But we've done it with hot dog buns before, like brioche hot dog buns. We've done it with croissants. Croissants is real good. Or just any like French bread, a white bread, whatever you've got. Doesn't really matter. We just do it with our hodgepodge, whatever we have on hand, but it turns out delicious. The kids love it. We love it. Kind of gives an elevated breakfast for dinner type of feel. So it's a really fun thing we like to do. Like I said, you got to give them time to cook them up. And here, this was probably the nicest day that we had on this trip. So we're like, we got to eat outside. Now, it was a little cold, especially with the wind picked up in the afternoon. But the sun was out. And so that was the ticket. That's what we were looking for. Nice and sunny. And such a good time, I think, always, like we talk about, to be able to sit down at the table together and just discuss what we loved, what our plans were for the evening, what else we have going on for the next day, and what we really enjoyed about the day that we had. I always try to take the opportunity, too, to talk about how, like, the significant things in life, I guess. Like, what stands out as important? What are the corrections in our behavior that we need to have? How are we showing what's most important to us? How are we shaping and conforming our hearts and our minds to Scripture or to serve God? And I think the relationships needed and the parts to achieve that, so much of that is just formed by doing things together. Now, here we found a beach on spring break where nobody was in the parking lot. And that's my style. I love it when it's not packed, let's be honest. But our goal here was to see the sunset. Our goal here was to get out in the evening and see the sunset. Now, this is a little beach. You can drive down on the beach here, and it's north of Seaside. And I think a little north of, like, Gearhart. But it was this beautiful beach. We walked over a little dune to get there. And here's my encouragement in this. If it was probably 6 o'clock when we got to this beach, and if we'd chalked up our day, said we were tired, and put our feet up, and turned the kids in early to bed, we would have missed this opportunity. And I think this was one of the cooler things that we got to do while we were on this trip. And so my encouragement to you guys is this, especially if you're parents: work hard and play harder. Do what you need to do for the nutrition, for the exercise, for the sleep, to be ready to take these extra adventures, because your kids have the energy most of the time. They're ready for it. We saw bald eagle. We saw sand dollars. Found whole sand dollars that we'd never found in the past. The sun was beautiful. The tide was out. And we would have totally missed this chance if we would have just folded it up after dinner. Now, does it create a little extra work? Yeah, you got to catch up on the dishes. We got to bed late this evening. But the adventure of it and the experience as a family together, to just experience God's creation together, to experience adventure together, to experience joy together, I really feel like these are defining moments. That these are moments that your kids will remember. We sat on top of this bluff and we sang some hymns together. Is a really unique time that we would have totally missed out on if we didn't say, you know, we intentionally purpose to be ready to do something together, when the most important thing in what we're doing isn't our own priorities, but it's the legacy of our family. When every pair of shoes that went to this beach wasn't worn again on this trip because they were so sandy. But the kids wanted to play in the sand so bad. They wanted to run in the sand. And it's good. I have to remind myself that it's good to let them be kids. It's good to give them the chance to adventure. It's good to see something new together. And it's good to experience the beauty of what God's creation is together. And it's good to sing of his glory in his creation together, to worship him in song together. And I want to encourage you guys to look around you, whether it's where you are at home or it's your next vacation, and try to find opportunities where you can do that as well. Another day and another fire. This time we're trying to burn up some recycling that we got going. These sausages we didn't make, but they're an Italian sausage, and if you need a dinner idea, here is one for you. So I love sausage. I think it doesn't get enough credit all the time, but it was really simple. Just sausage and pasta, Parmesan cheese and butter. We went on a little walk, and then we're going to do a regular campfire this night. And we normally love s'mores, but a couple years ago, we got this super cool popcorn maker. And if you've never done this, it's kind of a blast. So we got these pouches that just have the popcorn kernels and the kind of butter flavored oil. It's probably not good for you, but then you just pass the popcorn popper around the fire, hold it over the flames, and give it some shakes. And it's actually pretty delicious. And it's super fun because it's just not how you normally make popcorn. It's camp style popcorn. This popper just lives in the trailer, and it's all black and gross on the bottom, but it makes delicious popcorn and gives a chance, I think, to have a fireside treat that's not loaded up with stickiness and sugar. Although I'm sure kettle corn in this would be pretty delicious. And yeah, so we love to do this, and then you get the popcorn out, get a good book to read, and you're set. So this evening, the previous evening we'd been on the beach, and this evening our intentionality is the same, but it just looks different. The intentionality is finding joy in something else, finding joy in the adventure of a book, finding joy in the adventure of hunkering down and reading together and having a treat. So be intentional, I think, is the message I think that we want to share. Now this is a quick lunch on the next day, and then we're off on another adventure. Now, we've been to Fort Stevens several times as a family before, but I think the cool thing, even about going somewhere you've been before, is every year the kids get older. Every year they have new questions. And this time particularly, we decided to try to explore some different areas of this historic fort before we went to the areas that we were really familiar with. So we kind of went off the beaten path, saw this cool power station, saw another building here, and then we quickly found ourselves out here at a different battery that we'd actually never been inside before. And this is just cool. it's amazing the amount of concrete and these giant bays they have for these big cannons. And then down inside, you can kind of get to see all of the tight inner workings of what they had in different places. And this one in particular had more open places underneath it than the main battery at Fort Stevens here. And so it was really cool to get to see. This part of it was pretty trashed. It was like a storeroom. This is where the gun would have been. And it just has these big rings, but then all the mechanics of it obviously have been torn out. But this is Battery Clark. So if you go to Fort Stevens, Battery Clark, it was dark.
Hey, baby.
What? Oh yeah, well, so what, they used to use the track to move the shells, for the cannon.
Daddy, let's down that way.
This was a really cool battery to be in because, like you say, it's so dark, and you really could explore all these areas that weren't closed off. So here we got to see where the old magazine was on these huge doors, original hinges. And this fort was used in the World War II era. And so it's old. And so it's this cool blend of history and science that I think is so important for kids to get out and really experience. It's better than reading it in a book because you can actually walk through and see the rails on the ceiling and talk about how they would have moved the shells and how heavy they were and where the guns would have been and why they're so far from the ocean and all these different pieces. And then you run into things like this where you even got science just totally mixed in. We got stalactites and stalagmites where the minerals collect in the water that drips through, and the floor in these areas, the ground is all bumpy. These big bumps of minerals collected up under it. So it's just pretty cool. Battery Clark, William Clark Battery at Fort Stevens. If you go there, definitely a cool one to check out and kind of off the beaten path. And then once we did that, it was just off to see the adventure of what's next. There's no like map, but we ran into this cool basement, and it turned out to be the hospital. And then we go down these super steep steps and through a little corridor, and it's just all creates a sense of adventure, I think, with the kids. A sense of curiosity. What's next? What did they use this for? And sometimes you got the answer, and sometimes you don't have the answer. But even like this, you see like, oh, you could walk through here without being seen from the road. Or here's the fire station right next to where all the houses were, where the soldiers would live. And then this was a detailed explanation of the minefield that they had in the in the channel of the Columbia River. And then this is always a highlight for me. At Fort Stevens, the original Fort Stevens was this earthworks that was built during and then after, ultimately finished not until after, the Civil War. When the Union realized that the mouth of the Columbia was critical and they needed to protect it from the Confederacy, they brought these giant cannons, the largest cannons of its day, by boat up the Columbia and then carted them into this earthworks where they were prepared to defend the channel in the Confederacy. And there's this big moat and these earthworks around. Really, really cool. Here's the inside of the little museum that they have there, and you can kind of see the guns from the different era and the dress from the different era. And then here we're reviewing the aerial map of where we had been that day already and where we wanted to go, kind of exploring the different things and seeing pictures of the wood structures that are all torn down and missing now, but really cool to see them. And then this is the main part of the fort that's probably the most well maintained. You know, they have the chained off, the drop offs, and really have it set up so that you can explore and see. And they have more of the metal and more of they have a big gun that you can look at in a couple of different places where the replicas are in there. And that's just, it's pretty special. It's pretty fun. The kids love climbing around. And again, you're doing dangerous things carefully. I don't know how many times you say, don't go too close to the edge, but it's 100% worth it because you get to teach history, you get to experience the outdoors, you get to teach science, and it's all part of our learning journey together. It's all part of our homeschooling. It's all part of our family legacy, and it teaches them teamwork. They work together, and they wait for each other. They help each other out, and I think it's so cool to see how different things like really turn their cranks. Like this time, Noah was all about this replica cannon. It was just like he's up on the stand trying to figure out how it works. And then him and Jonah here, they're trying to figure out how the shells come in on the tracks and go up the elevator from this tray, how this tray fits up the elevator. Oh, it doesn't, and what it was used for. Just every part of this is really cool. So big shout out to the veterans who have put this part of the exhibit together in the bunker. It's really, really neat to read about and see kind of how they would have run one of these battle stations in its day. And again, it's that same thing where whoever wants to pay attention, or as a group, we really focus on trying to take the learning opportunity, not just to run around and be crazy, but to take the learning opportunity of each step. Here's another thing we never seen before at Fort Stevens is outside of the park, actually, there's this guardhouse, and it's just this really cool old brick building. Super cool if you were a photographer. It will be great pictures and just these neat archways. This is where the jail was for the base. So just another adventure, something new we hadn't seen. On our way back that day, these elk were literally in somebody's yard. It's pretty neat. This is another favorite dinner of ours. It's like a butter chicken and rice. Really, really good. Cooks up quick. So we were able to get down to the beach in Seaside and walk from where we parked down to the salt works. Now remember, we'd seen it Fort Clatsop. We'd learned about the salt works. Now we're bringing it full circle a few days later, and we actually get to look at what is believed to be the historic site where the salt works actually were, in the sense that there is a gal who was a native who was born just 10 years after the Lewis and Clark expedition was there, and she remembers her grandfather or her dad showing her that that's where they did it. So it's a pretty cool piece of history to know. It's not just like made up. It really was there that they made the salt, or at least very close to there. Beautiful beach.
Noah.
This was another fun time walking on the beach. Now the kids have the sand dollar bug, so they are looking. We didn't find any whole ones that day, but we did get to see the turnaround here at Seaside. And then we wanted to take the chance to get the kids inside to one of the very few merry-go-rounds that actually is in existence in Oregon. This carousel was pretty cool to look at and really fun for the kids to do a little ride on. Another beautiful day, and our intention this day was to get up to Ecola State Park and do a little hike to see a lookout where we could see the Tillamook Head Lighthouse. But when we got there, Ecola State Park was closed because the roads washed out. And I looked at my Onyx maps again, and I thought, oh, we can get down to the beach and we can walk around a little ways, and then we can get up to the trail. Well, that was definitely not the case. So we ended up going into Cannon Beach, and we could see the lighthouse from there. So we got to tell the story of the lighthouse, which is pretty amazing that people used to spend a month at a time out there. And then we just, on this windy day, walked down the beach to look at Haystack Rock. So definitely a unique experience. A lot of people, but it was spring break, and it is kind of an iconic place to see. So we enjoyed it, and it was beautiful, and it's really an incredible rock there. And then the kids trekked probably 3 miles this day. So we got ice cream and then back to camp for another camp-style dinner. So this time, our kielbasa dogs with french fries and a slaw. Really, really just one of my favorites for dinner. These are the dogs that the sausages that we didn't smoke. So these are the ones cooked from raw, but I get some nice color on them, and they're delicious. Now on our way back, we stopped at this wildlife refuge. So this is on the way from Seaside back to Portland, and you turn off the highway like really close to the Elderberry Inn, and you head north towards the highway that goes to Astoria. And up there is over 1,000 acres of wildlife refuge. And so here in this picture, you actually see a beautiful coyote right before the creek there, and then all these elk. And this place, they had a lot of details about when the elk were there, but the elk are there a lot of the year, and it was incredible. And I didn't realize this, but the elk had not shed their antlers yet for the last year. So we did see like a 4-point elk in this group. So we got the binoculars out, and it was a good time. Definitely worth checking out. But we hope that all these adventures are encouraging to you to spend intentional time with your family, leading them and discipling them in the Word of God and the truth found in His Word, and to leave a legacy behind. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.